Now, so we talked about working with composite data types, and I did introduce what a composite data type is, of course, in comparison with their counterpart, that is the scalar data type, or the LOB, that is the large object data type. We also have the reference data type, but we've not actually talked about the LOB, and again talked about the reference data type. What we've actually talked about, and of course what we've actually used practically, is actually the scalar data type. So if you remember the scalar data type, it's all about the varchar 2, like number, like dates. You see, these are purely scalar data types, and data types. And yesterday, I did introduce this particular type of data type, which is actually called the composite data type. Now, with this type of data type, this is as an example. For example, we are meant to use the two types. For example, we are meant to use the PLSQL records. This is about mentioning the records, and again, the PLSQL collections. And I know we've not actually talked about the PLSQL collections. So that is exactly what we're going to do it today. Now, we did actually the PLSQL records. And when we talk about now about this composite data type and the scalar data type, both of them are data types. And both of them falls under the PLSQL variables or PLSQL data types. Remember, we have PLSQL variables and non-PLSQL variables. So PLSQL variables actually carries scalar data type, carries the composite data type, carries the LOB, that is the large object data type, and of course it also carries the reference data type. But in this case, let's just compare the two, the scalar data types and the composite data type, which actually falls under the PLSQL variables. Now, the reason why we have scalar data types, the difference between the two, the main difference between the two is that scalar data types usually takes or hold a single value at a time. But for composite data types, it holds multiple values at a time. So if you want to capture multiple rows from the employees table or from your any table that you have, then you should be ready to use the composite data type, but not the scalar data types. If you want to retrieve only a single row, then of course just use the scalar data type. Now, so that brings us now to the composite data type. So we say that for a composite data type, it's actually subdivided into two categories. We have the PLSQL records and we have the PLSQL collections, PLSQL records and PLSQL collections. Now, when we talk about the PLSQL records and PLSQL collections, or records and collections, both of them are meant to hold multiple data, or they are meant to store multiple data, especially if you are to come up with their own variables. It will be, it will actually give you a platform where you're supposed to hold multiple values. Now, what is the difference now? Because yes, there's something that is common between them is to hold multiple values. But if you look at them, why is it that we have the two? We have the records and we have the collections. So what is the difference again between the records and the collections? You see, when we talk about, let's say describe employees. Describe employees. If you look at the data types, if you look at this column, the data types, for example, we have employee ID. This is number. We have first name and last name. These are both varchar. So you can see we have varchar, 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 varchar. Now, for PLSQL records, if I'm to store or I want to capture data of different data types, if I want to capture data of different data types, that means I want to capture employee ID, that is number. I want to capture first name, that is varchar 2. I want to capture hire date, that is date. You see, there are three columns, but of different data types. So if I want to hold this, then it means that I have to create a what? I have to create a PLSQL record or a record. So records will allow me to hold multiple values of different data types. Whereas collections will allow me to hold multiple values of similar data type. For example, I am not actually expecting to capture employee ID and first name using collections. That won't work. So what I have to do is that if I'm to capture only the values of number data type, then I'm supposed to capture it only that. If I'm to capture varchar, let's say those values whose data type is varchar, then automatically I have to capture only the varchar tools or the character values. If I'm to capture higher date, that means I'm to capture only the date values. I have to work with that. So for collections, they are specific. For collections, they are specific. If you're to work with similar data types, then work with collections. If you're to work with different data types, then work with records. And that is how it is. Now, so that we can have like a general overview, between PLSQL records and PLS. Yes, question? Okay. Now, for composite data, first of all, remember it's actually there to help you hold multiple values. Now, multiple values in the sense that you are able to display 5 records at a go. You're able to display 10 records at a go. That is exactly what composite data type is. But now when we break it down to records, records are there to hold multiple values, but of different data types. So for example, if I want to capture all these records here, you see all these records, each one has a different, of course you can find like 2 or 3 have same data types. But let's take this. We have those that are of number data types. We have those that are of varchar data types. We have again those that are of date data type. So if you look at it, we have number, we have varchar, and we have date. So if I want to capture this information, since all this information have different data types, then I have to go with the PLSQL records. But if I want only to capture one value of a similar data type, let's say, for example, I want to capture only values whose data type is number, or I want to capture values of number data type alone, then I need to use PLSQL collections. That does not mean that I cannot do that with PLSQL records. PLSQL records can also do that. But in this case, for PLSQL collections, it is so specific. If you're to capture number data type, then capture numbers alone. If you're to capture character, then ensure that the values that are being provided is only character values. If I want to capture date values, then I have to ensure that the values are only, the data type is actually date values. So I'm going to show you practically how we can do this. So I think, so for records, it is of different data types, to hold the different data types. Collections, similar data type. Records, different data types. Collections, similar data types. Yeah, so I think that is well captured. Now, coming to this part, let me just open like a notepad for just a few minutes. When we talk about collections, based on the definition given that it is meant to capture similar or data of similar data type. Now, when we talk about collection, in this case, collections are actually subdivided. Collections, let's say, are used to hold, let's say, to hold multiple values of similar data type. This is what I mean. Now we have like categories of collections. Categories of collections. Number one, we have something called persistent collections. And number two, we have something called the non-persistent collection. Now, what is the difference? What is the difference between the two? When we talk about persistent collection here, we are talking about those collections which store the collection structure. Let's say in short, these are used to store collection structure. Are used to store collection structure with the data. Because with the data, let me just push it there. So with the data, physically into the database. So DB is actually the short form for database and can be accessed again if need be. Now that is one point about persistent. That is one point about persistent collections. I will try to elaborate that. Now for this one, we can actually talk about they are being created. They are created within the PL/SQL block and at a schema or database level. Now that is what this is, the persistent collections. This is the persistent collections. Now if we come down and talk about the non-persistent, so that we can compare now the two. The non-persistent, this only stores data structure. Remember, you're talking about the collection data structure or the data structure, it means the same, just for one session. Just for one session. Now, for this one, it is created within the PL/SQL block alone. Now here, examples here are, or the example is, we have an example of associative array or into bracket nested, not even nested, index by array. Now on this other side, let me just admit. So on this other side, we have examples. So examples include, so we have the nested tables, so I call the nested tables, and VARRAY, which of course stands for variable sized array. Okay, so let that be enough. Now here we are talking about the categories of collections. We've not actually talked about the types, although I've actually mentioned down here. So when we talk about a collection, for a collection being it that it is basically meant to hold multiple values of similar or same data type. They are actually subdivided, or we have the subcategories of the collections, where we are talking about the persistent collections. And based on the definition, these are used to store collection structure or data structure with the data physically being placed into the database. And this data can be accessed again if need be. Now, this tells us what? If we are to create a nested or a persistent collections, it means that it is stored within the database. It is stored within the database, or it is being captured by the database. They are created within the PLSQL block. Of course, this is the only way you can create that by now, but later we will also see how we can create persistent collections using packages, and that is the only avenue where we can access this particular collection, because a question may crop up from you guys that, yes, if we are to store them into the database, how can we access them, or how can we access it? So we cannot actually access it, although the definition tells us that. But once we get to packages where we can embed the persistent collection, then that is the only way we can access that. So one, they are created within the PLSQL block, and again, at a schema or database level. So you see, if you are not connected to HR, it means that you're operating from the database level or the schema level. If you remember the definition for a schema, schema is almost similar, is actually similar to a database. Now, what are some of the examples of persistent collections? We have nested tables and we have VARRAY. VARRAY stands for variable sized arrays. So for persistent collections, we have the two nested tables, which we'll actually look at it, and then we have VARRAY. Now, on the other side of non-persistent collections, these again are collections, but this type of collections are only stored with, especially, you see, once you start your, especially when you connect to the database in the first place, you connect as super user and then you connect as HR, you are connecting to that particular session. So for now, we are operating from the HR account. So it means that our active session now is HR. If you connect to sysdba before connecting it to HR, it means that your operational session is sysdba. It's actually sysdba. So what happens is, when it comes to talking about the non-persistent collections, these are only stored data structures just for one session, or they're stored within that particular session. As long as that session is active, that is the only point where we can hold. So even from the word persistent, does not even last long. It's only for that particular session. Once you log out of HR, that is the end of it. And you can see again, it's only created within the PLSQL block alone. So we are not talking about the schema or database level here. So a good example to that is the associative array, or in other words, you can call it index by. You can call it index by. Now, this brings us now to how can we execute the nested tables and how can we execute the VARRAYs. So I want to have a look at these two examples. And of course, later we'll also talk about the associative array. Let's start with the persistent collections. So I will put aside whatever thing I've already recorded with you, that is the PLSQL records. And if you remember very well, that there are three types of PLSQL records. We have the table-based record, we have the cursor-based record, and then we have the user-defined record. So in composite data type, since we have the two types, the records and collections, each one has three examples. You see, for records, we have table-based, cursor-based, user-defined. For collections, we have associative array, nested tables, and VARRAY. So we need to see how can we implement the nested tables and how can we implement the VARRAYs, and of course, how can we implement the associative array. Now, let's have a look at an example. And then from there, we will now come back and understand this. Now, if I can just talk about the nested, let me talk about the nested tables. Nested tables. I know probably we've encountered, in SQL, we encounter something called the nested blocks, and those were blocks inside another block, or a block inside another block. When it comes to the nested table, again, this actually tells you that it's a table inside a table. This is so direct. Now, so is a table, we can just say is a table inside another table. Now, this example or this definition, we may not actually see it more clear, but as we advance, we'll be able to see how we can incorporate or embed a table inside another table in collections. Another point, we can say nested tables are one-dimensional structure, which are persistent. Of course, this tells you again that it's a persistent. And we have this term, unbounded in nature. Then, of course, are accessible. Let's say this is the last, are accessible. Yeah, I think I'm okay through PLS SQL. So with SQL and PLSQL, you can access this type of collection. And let me add, and are used in tables, they are used in records, and let's say object definitions. Okay, now, so if you look at this, it's more of like trying to understand now on a, probably on a more single point. And there's a point again, I can just, probably it can hold any number. It can hold any number of elements, as long as you supply the elements in an ordered set. Okay. So of course, if you're talking about it can hold any number, of course, we expect it to capture multiple values. And for this case, I want to have a syntax, which of course gives us the example. Let me even not go to the syntax. Let me explain it from this point so that we can copy it and do what? And paste it. And then later I will just forward this particular document. Now, what happens is, of course, the first step when it comes to working with SQL Plus, first of all, you're supposed to set the server output on. You see, set server output on. And for this case, I'm assuming that we have the SQL with us. So what happens is, let me just get rid of it. Okay, let me just have it so that we can have it a smooth flow. Now, number two, we need to have, again, like the declare. Remember now, this one is so obvious. For you to get the output of any PLSQL block, you're supposed to set the server output on. From this part, you have to declare. So let me just get rid of this SQL. You know now how it works. So the next step is to start with the name type. Remember, I'm talking about what? The nested tables. So here we need to define the nested table, and then we declare and initialize. Now, what is the name? What is the name for our nested table? So for this case, I will just write in lowercase, just to know that whatever thing I'm writing in lowercase is not a keyword. What I'm writing in uppercase is actually a keyword. The one in lowercase, as long as it's not a keyword, you can actually assign any letter of your, any word of your choice. So let me have like my nested table. That is the name. And then we can say is table of number. Remember, I'm talking about an element, or I'm talking about a type of collection or a collection, which of course must take a similar data type. So here I must state the data type I'm trying to retrieve. So is table of number. Now, from there, we need to create a variable. So variable, I can give it a name. Let me have it as var1. And because this example is not attached to any database object or to any table, for example, employees, departments, jobs, of course, something which we will come later and do, I don't need to provide, okay, I'm not aware of the data type because we are not connected to any table here. So what I will do is I will create my first variable, and then I will use the name of this particular table to serve it as, to define the data type for our case. So var1 is the variable name, and then we assume the name of the table be a data type or to supply a data type of its own. Since this particular name is automatically assigned to a table, which we expect to populate some values, which is of number data type. Now, if I if I terminate it with the semicolon at that point, this tells me what? It tells me that already I have declared my variable. This part was about defining. This part is about declaring a variable. But how can I initialize? I want to initialize. As initializing means you want to assign a value to your variable. So how can we initialize this? So to initialize this, I need again to have a copy of this. Let me paste it. And then into bracket, I want to have some random names. Random values, of course, which should automatically be of number data type. Let me have 5. Let me have 7. Let me have 65. Let me have 56. Let me have 89. And let me have 95. Now remember, these are just random values. Remember the last statement here. It can hold any number of elements in an ordered set. It can hold any number of elements in an ordered set. So in this case, we have, this is my set. And doesn't mean that I should have like a specific number of values. No, you can have 3, you can have 4, you can have 5. It doesn't have a limit. So now you see that I am actually having these numbers, and the data type itself is number. So it means that I'm actually at the right course. Now what follows is begin. And then from this point, we need now to put dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket. I can decide to give, let's say, some information like value of, okay, let's say value stored at index 1. Or you can just even use your own statement. Value stored at index 1. Let me just put is. We can have such statement. And of course, if you remember, for my case, I don't know. I don't have this. So it's somewhere, but I don't remember what it is. I have this simple called the pipe simple. The pipe simple. Don't worry about that. But for your case, I think you have it. So what happens is I'll just paste, you see the way it is, and then I will come and specify my variable 1. So variable 1, and then into bracket. Remember, you should have the 2 brackets. So at this point, I must put 1. Now, this is because when counting even a number of lists, if you have like list of items, you see these items are ordered. For example, 5 is 1. 7 is 2, 65 is 3, 56 is 4, 89 is 5, 95 is 6. So we must order them. For example, if I want to capture the first value, I need to specify 1 because this is actually the name of my variable. So it means that inside this variable called var1, we have a list of values, and this list of values are of number data types, and they are not one, they are actually many. So I need to probably capture the first one. If you want to capture the second one, you can still copy this, you can paste. Now this one I can make a statement, this is 2, and then here is 2. You see? So let's capture the 2. And of course, the same thing can go on from 65, 56, 89, and 85. So it is time now for us to end. And then, of course, we terminate. So this is the simplest. This is the simplest way of coming up with a nested block. Now, let us execute. So the only thing I do now is just to copy. Right click, copy. Let's go to this point. Now for this one, I'll just CL SCR, that is to clear screen. And then let me set server output on, and then let me paste. So I will right click up there, come to edit and paste. So I think here we have numbers. Let me just press enter and see what happens. Now look at this. Value stored at index 1 is what? Is 5, which is actually this. Value stored at index 2 is 7, so this is 7. And that is how this particular nested tables actually works. Now we can also do this. Let me change a little bit. You see, after executing it on the terminal, then you can just use ed and you can still change something there. Now, I can still use a different way to explore this. I can still use a different way to explore this. And this time around, I'm using the for loop. I will maintain this part. I will maintain it the same way it is. So the only point for us to change it is actually at this point. So in this case, I will maintain, let me maintain the last one, or let me just capture this one. I don't want it to, let me paste it down here. I will bring it back. Okay, let me capture even the entire. Now, this is actually another way of displaying nested function, or nested tables. So after begin, I need to introduce the for loop. So I can just use, let's say, for I in, then number 1, I want to start from the first value, then dot, and then the name of the variable, which is var1 dot count. So we want the system to count it, to count all the values starting from the first value. Then press enter, then write loop, and then let me paste what already I have actually cut it. And then for this case, I can just even restructure the sentence. Let me restructure the sentence. Let's say, of course, we have this value here. Let me cut. So value stored at index, let's say index, put that. Let me paste. Let me put I. I means what? It is actually this one. I can paste again that, and then give space, type is space, then put that. And then I can just have, let's say var1 into bracket, then I. var1 into bracket, then I. Then of course, ensure you also have another bracket. Then from there, because you have a loop, you have to stop. You have to do that end loop. And of course, this is another way. This is another way to execute the contents, or to capture the contents of a nested block, or nested tables, not block. Now, so let me save, and then we see what happens. So I will close it. And now you can see that we have this. So what I will do, I will supply with the / and press enter. And now you can see that all values have been retrieved. All values have been retrieved. So this is another way. This is another way of retrieving the nested tables. So we will still repeat this. Now, let me take you to another one. Remember, now we are talking about the VARRAY. So how can we display VARRAY? So VARRAY, remember, stands for the variable sized arrays. And for this particular part, I can say is, okay, let me just capture some information like is, let me write it, is an array. VARRAY is an array whose number of elements, can vary, whose number of elements can vary from 0. When you talk about 0, you're talking about empty into bracket to the declared maximum size, maximum size. That is the shortest definition we can actually talk about this. Now, when creating a VARRAY, we have like what do you call, like the order. For example, number 1, you are supposed to define. Number 2, you are supposed to declare. Now, defining means you're supposed to attach a name to that VARRAY. Declare means you're supposed to attach a variable to that, or to declare a variable. After declaring the variable, you're supposed to initialize. That means you're supposed to attach a value to that. After initializing, you are supposed to assign. After assigning, as the last step, you are supposed to access. So you define, you declare, you initialize, you assign, and then you access. Now, I will show you this. Let's look at an example here. Now, for the example here, we will start with declare. Of course, the set serve output on should be something which is common. So what I'm doing here, I want to define. I want to define. So both defining and declaring happens within the declaration section. So we will again use the type, and then let me just use VARRAY. Let me just use VARRAY type. Let that be the name of my VARRAY. And then we can say is VARRAY. Remember, the other one is table of number. This one is VARRAY. Then into bracket 7. Of course, this is the size of the VARRAY, or the precision. Then we can say of varchar. Varchar what? Let's say varchar 2. Let's say 40, or even let's say 30. You see, is VARRAY 7 of varchar 230. So look at this again. What is the common thing between VARRAYs and nested tables? It's actually the way it takes a single data type and deals with that. So for this one, we are using varchar 2. So on your own examples, as you will be following this particular tutorial, I want you to probably see how you can use different data types. From there, we want to create a VARRAY here, a variable now. So we are done with what? Defining. We are done with defining. So we want now to declare. So to declare means that I need to mention the day. And remember, I want us to have an example like how can we display the days of the weeks, day of the week. So again, based on that, I want to give you like an assignment. I am going to show you using the VARRAY. I'm going to show you how to display a single day. Let's say, for example, Monday. I want to show you how to display Monday using VARRAY. And then tomorrow, you come and show me how we can display all the days of the week from Monday to Sunday using the same VARRAY, using the same concept. So that is an assignment in line. So the data type for this, let me just even use a small lowercase day. let me use the VARRAY type, paste it, and then that is declare. This is declare. Now I want to initialize, equals to, I want to initialize, then equals to the same, then into bracket I'm putting null. Now this null represents Monday, and it represents the first column or the first output, which of course we expect to get the output of Monday. And what null does is it forces you to put a value. It forces you to put a value. So after that, we are done with define and declare and initialize. So the assign and access, this will come now at the execution point. At the execution point. So for begin, I want to mention the day. Of course, I want now to attach a value. So let's say day into bracket 1, day into bracket 1, and then I'm going to attach. Now day 1, this means it is the first value, which means it is the first day of the week. Then I'm going to attach it as what? As Monday. Then from there, I am going now to have the DBMS. That is the access point, the assigned point, and the access point. So output dot put underscore line into bracket. Let's say the day. Okay. Let's say the day today. Okay, let me just have this. I can even just use day into bracket. Let's say number 1, and then put this, and then put that, and then so again, I think I'm going back. Okay, sorry for that. I think I can just even use, because still I have it here. Yeah, the samples. For your case, you have it. So I can just put it there. And then talk about what? Talk about day into bracket 1. You see? So this is just but a statement. This is just but the statement. I can even have like the day. The day today is, yeah. And ensure you put another bracket, because this bracket, it's actually for 1. Then from there, what we do, we end. And then we put that /. So this is the simplest we can go. And this is how I am able to display today's, when is today? It's Monday. So let me copy and then go back to this point. And then I'll come here and edit, and then I've not actually copied. Okay, right click, copy. Then come back here, up there, edit. What is happening? Let me paste. Yeah. So this is it. If I press enter, look at that. Perfect. So the day today is Monday. The day today is Monday. So now, based on this assignment, based on the assignment I want to give you, I want you to use the same VARRAY. Just the same VARRAY I'm portraying here, or I'm just executing here. I want you to display for me Monday up to Sunday. So by tomorrow, I think I'm going to have a look at that before we start another chapter. And this actually marks the end of the working with composite data types. We've actually talked about not even like marking the end. I think we're going to talk about another one, which is actually the associative array. I think that we're going to talk about it tomorrow, so that we can start another chapter. And if at all there will be any question on the other videos, or the ones that I had about the records, or even about the loops, or even about the cursor I did introduce, we can still work with that. Now, up to that point, any questions so far? Any questions so far? Remember the assignment. You have to display the day of the week or days of the week using VARRAY. Yeah. So unfortunate for Robert, you're late a little bit, but I think you're going to find out about this recording and you will be able to go through. And also Daniel. Any questions so far up to that point? Yes. Yes. So yes, this is the VARRAY. And then the other two are for the nested tables. So this one is for the nested table. The one that I've given my nested table, this is for the nested. Even this one is for the nested. So what I've not actually given out is the associative array. I've not done the associative array, although I've given one example for the VARRAY. Yeah, so this one is for the VARRAY. So we will still have a look at probably two other examples because now we need to expound. You see, after having the first example, we can now expand it to understand even in a more complex way. Because you can actually build this, you can extend this to a more complicated, even complicated VARRAY. But I just want to bring out this on a simpler mode so that we can all understand how it's supposed to go. So the question is, or the assignment is that, how can you display the days of the week? Given an example here, I have managed to display the first day of the week, which is Monday. How can I display the rest of the days of the week? Using only what? VARRAY. Yeah, I think it's okay. Yes, Brian? Yes. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Your block. Okay, this is it. I think I've understood you. You see, for example, this one is my last, this is my last block I'm executing. So no other block I've executed after this. This is the last one. So if I want to edit this in a more easy way, then you have to type ed, just type ed for editor. So if you press enter, automatically it will give you, it will display it in Notepad. No. Just type on the, you see, for example, here on cell, yes, on SQL here, I've just typed ed. Then you adjust it. Just adjust it. Once you adjust it, or once you're done, just save and close that editor. If you close that editor, look at what will happen. It will come back. It will come back to this part again, which will prompt you to enter the / peke yake sasa and press enter. So utakuwa umebadilisha. But sasa kama for example execute this block, this is the most recently executed block, na labda kuna ingine hapa juu unataka kubadilisha, sasa hiyo hakuna namna, itabidi tu ucopy. Kama for example this one, itabidi tu ucopy, select yote, alafu kwa the white part uko right click it, kuja kwa edit, alafu copy. So ukikopi hiyo, then itabidi tena urudi useme ed But this time round itabidi sasa ufute hii yote sasa. Now paste here. Now make adjustments. After making adjustments, save, and then click yes, and then press enter. Yeah, of course, there was an error there. So let me see. Now, ukileta hapa, kuna these two. You see, you have to, lazima remove hizi. Wakati umecopy from somewhere. Lazima tutoe hizo number. Yeah, so I think this is all helpful now. So now okay, save, close it, put / press enter. Now you can see the way it is. Yeah. So just go with that. I want that example. Have in mind